Hello everyone and welcome to my first ever YouTube video on my Saucy Seamstress channel. I'm Christine Cooper, the Saucy Seamstress. There is a story behind that name, but maybe that's a video for another time. I wanted to share with you a little bit before we get started today my journey and what this channel is going to be. I started historical costuming maybe 10 years ago. Simply because I wanted to attend a Regency ball that was happening in our region, and so I started sewing, but I'd had an interest in historic clothing since forever. I, as a child, loved old movies and loved the glamour of them. And in the 90s was really into swing music and that whole, like the whole aesthetic around it, which I still wear vintage clothes, so it kind of stuck around. But I hadn't really started sewing my own things, like I said, until about 10 years ago. And, you know, I think it's with every costumer, we look back at our first costume and we're like, ugh, that's not the thing. But I've grown a lot since then, and I think in the last probably 5 years, my costuming has improved significantly for a couple of reasons. When I've been able to study more extant garments, not always from the periods that I'm interested in, because I really love 18th century, and you know it's really difficult to get your hands on you know, a 1760s gown. But being able to see how things were assembled, the care that was taken or not taken, can sometimes help you feel better about what you're making, but it can also improve your own skills. And so that's what I wanted this channel to be. I've been thinking about doing it for years, and I finally now have the opportunity and the ability to make something that I feel comfortable putting out into the interwebs. And so I wanted to share my collection with you, so that will be part of this channel. But the other part of this channel will be my sharing with you my adventures and misadventures in sewing, creating historic pieces or historic costume pieces for myself, or maybe others as it happens. So yeah, I guess that means this is like also part vlog, which I don't really like the term vlog. It just sounds weird to me. But anyway, that's the what and the why of this channel. Today, I'm going to take you through the process that I use when I'm able to examine extant garments. And this is usually a process that I would use looking at someone else's collection or an organization's collection. And so I do have a checklist that I bring my laptop with me, and I run through a checklist that I've adapted more to suit my needs and the things that I'm trying to find out about a garment, but it's adapted from a checklist that you can find in the Dress Detective by Ingrid Mitta and Alexandra Kim. I also bring with me some tools. Like I said, I bring my computer, I bring my camera, I bring a pencil and a sketchbook. I find the process of sketching out what a garment looks like helps me to look for more detail than I might if I'm just snapping a quick photo. I bring a tape measure and a magnifying glass, which makes me feel like my grandma, but this one has an LED light, so I can get some if I need some extra light, it's doubly useful. So the piece that we're going to look at today has come down through my family, came to me from my mother when she was downsizing from our family home to an apartment. It is my great-grandmother's wedding dress from 1904. And I even have their little like wedding day book that has the exact date of it and all the witnesses, like all the guests at their wedding, which I think is really sweet. But Walter Steele and Mary Harling from Duncannon, Pennsylvania on September 4th, 1902. And so not 1904, 1902. There we go. That's just a little bit of some of the quality and accuracy you can get from my channel. Anyway, 1902. And as you can see, I have this in an archival box. Not all of the pieces that I have in my collection are stored so well, but the pieces that are family heirlooms or the most fragile or the oldest are in these boxes. And actually, if you're interested, let me know down in the comments, and we could do a video on how to properly store your collection or your heirlooms for preservation. So let me know. But this is an archival box. This is from Gaylord. I keep my pieces in acid-free tissue, which you should always, always, always do. And I use actually some unbleached washed muslin as well in here. And so I'm gonna go wash my hands. I prefer not to use gloves. There are some differing opinions. Some people think that clean hands are good enough. Other things, people religiously use gloves to handle antique pieces. I prefer clean hands. I can feel when a garment is fragile. I can learn more about the textile. So that's the way I do things. And so I'm gonna go put my hair up because I touch my hair a lot, and wash my hands.
Running through the observation checklist, the first items to note are very basic general observations. The type of garment, the types of fabrics used, if they're natural, synthetic, or a blend, the dominant colors, are there any labels, the general time period, can the garment be handled without causing damage? Are there any unusual aspects of the garment? I call this a dress, but it is in fact two separate pieces made to wear together. It's made of very fine, sheer, off-white cotton. There are some aspects of its construction that have led me to believe that it was homemade. This old girl is pretty sturdy, not for wearing, but definitely can be handled. Though they aren't unusual, this garment has some inset eyelet lace and clustered tucks that add interest. I will fully admit that this is not my era, but I can see the style markers of the period. I don't know if the construction was typical, but we'll talk more about that a little later. As I observe, I record what I see. It's nice to be able to pull up a file on the computer rather than a box out of the closet. This bodice has a bust measurement of 40 inches and a waist of 48 inches. When worn, this would create the pigeon-pouched front common in turn-of-the-century clothing that would hang a little over the waistline. This style would accentuate the monoboob and narrow waist created by corsets of this period. This dress, rather than having the puffed sleeves common at the time, instead has a very simple 3/4 length sleeve that ends in a lovely ruffle. I know that the corset on the dress form is not the right decade. It's an 1890s corset from Red Threaded, and it's the best I had. I also don't have a corset cover because I bought this corset for a project that I never made. The front has a high neckline with a yoke. The yoke repeats the decorative features of the bodice with alternating sets of pin tucks and inset eyelet lace with a grapevine pattern. The decorative panel on the front of the bodice is gathered into the yoke. The yoke does not go around the whole neck, but stops at the shoulder seams. This decorative panel is approximately 12 inches wide. Clusters of 3 tucks are incorporated into the fine cotton of the bodice, separated by whitework eyelet lace. There are 3 front side panels, these two that run from the shoulder to the waist. This waistband is made of 2 pieces in the front that are simple rectangles, and these pieces, along with the additional width of the waist, create the shape of the pigeon poof. They run up to the shoulder, like I said, but they intersect with the arm sty, or this second one does, and it has a very narrow piece here. So like we have 2 seams very close together. I'm not sure why anyone would make a piece shaped like that. I wouldn't, unless it was a piecing issue or a fit issue. But we do have the third front side panel that is about 2 inches wide, runs from the waist to the underarm, then from the underarm to the hem of the sleeve. It runs the length of that. There's no decoration in this piece. There are no ruffles in this piece, no eyelets, no tucks. So I wonder if we were letting this garment out. So we've turned the bodice over and we can see the center back closure, obviously. What we cannot see very well maybe is that these back panels, both sides, are made up of 5 different pieces of fabric. So we have this underarm, side back piece, and it's filled in with this little triangle at the bottom. Then we have a very narrow strip of fabric that runs from waist to shoulder, intersecting with the armstyle, much like in the front. The shape of it looks as though it would have helped the garment fit to the body. And we then have the waist pieces that are very similar to the front, though they're not closed in the center. We then have this piece that is mostly rectangular. Then there are the 2 center back pieces. These are both decorated with 2 sets of additional tucks. We then have button closures, which we'll talk more about later. The bodice has very little staining or other damage, and I find this really surprising because it comes from a time when this might have been worn not just to get married, but as best. There is the faintest underarm staining, which I could only see when looking through my magnifying glass and with the LED light on. Now, I'm going to turn this inside out. I feel a little nervous about it. It feels wrong, but I know that this garment is sturdy enough to withstand this kind of handling, so I shouldn't be worried about it, but anyway, I am. So looking here at the inside, all of the seams are unfinished except for at the waist, and typically they are about 1/4 inch seam allowance. The seams, like I said, all raw. We have these pin tucks that are worked into that center front panel of the bodice, and this lovely little grapevine embroidery inset lace, or eyelet lace, I guess. And it's set very finely. Now, if you look very closely, you can sometimes see 2 rows of stitching down the sides on either side of the little mouse teeth there. We do have a little bit of fraying, nothing to write home about, but there, especially on the left-hand side, you can see 2 rows of stitching. This is really impressive to me because I am crap at precision sewing on a machine. Now then we get up here to the yoke again, unfinished edge, even where there are gathers, some fraying, but it's still very minimal. Though the seams on the front are all raw, when we turn the garment over, we can see some areas where the selvage has been used, like on this strange little triangle piece, and the side seam, which is also kind of a fluke in that it's about 1/2 inch instead of 1/4 inch, which is typical everywhere else. I love the sweet hand-worked buttonholes on this bodice. So we have the closures, which may be the only hand sewing done on any of the pieces of this ensemble. All the seams appear to be machine sewn, except for those. And where the buttons are attached, the thread is continuous from top to, well, almost from top to bottom. And closes with 16 small buttons down the back. When counting closures, like buttons, count the holes rather than the buttons, in case some have been lost over time. We have a narrow hem at the bottom, and that felled piece at the waist. And then over here to the sleeve, we have these lovely tucks on the ruffle. We have the felled seam where the lace is attached, and then this seam, which I can't quite see if it is a French seam or not because I didn't want to pull on it too much. So we have like all of these attachments, and these 2 here at the cuff are finished. We have these lovely tucks, and then almost a 1/2 inch hem, which you can see even the 1/4 inch that's closed within the hem. The skirt of the ensemble is of the same fabric, the 32-inch waist, and waist to hem length is 40 inches. There is a row of the inset eyelet lace, to which is attached a flounce. The flounce incorporates pin tucks and additional rows of eyelet lace.
Because of the sheerness and the fineness of this fabric, there is a lot of stress. There has been a lot of stress at the waistband, and there is a lot of damage and pulling and splitting right below the stitching of the waistband. We also have one area here where there's been sort of a hasty adjustment made. We are being taken in about 1 inch. So we have sheer fabric, no lining. The only lining is at the ruffle. We do have, again, inset eyelet lace, pin tucks, eyelet lace pin tucks, and the ruffle is gathered into this row of eyelet lace. As I flip up the ruffle, what I'm seeing is unfinished seams, which is kind of a shame. I half wonder if we had finished these seams, if some damage to the back of the skirt here may not have occurred. Well, no, that's not true, because it rips right through the inset sort of eyelet lace here. It just shredded it. It like almost looks like somebody stepped on the back of her dress, and it just so that's really a bummer. We do also have more staining, but that's just, you know, you walk around, your hem drags, it's going to get dirty.
Looking at the inside, starting with the back of the skirt, we find a narrow waistband with no buttonholes. It probably closed with a hook and eye closure. In fact, there are some areas where I found some threads that look like they could maybe have once been thread bar tacks for the hook closure. There's also a placket, a continuous placket set into the center back seam. Center back seam runs the length of the entire garment. It goes through the eyelet lace, through the flounce lining, all the way to the hem. If we flip that lining up, the seam of the flounce almost lines up with the center back seam, though not quite. The back of the skirt is constructed from 2 gores. The fabric that lines the flounce has a wide hem of about 2 inches, encasing about 1/2 inch raw edge. Here you can better see the tear that runs through the inset eyelet lace. At the back of the skirt, the gores of the skirt each have 1 raw edge and 1 selvage edge, and that is the way it's sewn the entire way around the skirt. Each seam has 1 raw and 1 selvage. And the seam allowances are still about 1/4 inch. All are unfinished. Even where the lace is set, the seams are unfinished, unlike the sleeves. So here we're taking a look at the front of the skirt, and the front is constructed with 3 gores. The seams of each, again, seam, raw edge, and selvage edge. And the seams run the full length, just like in the back. So there are 3 panels for the lining of the flounce, and I believe it's probably cut at one piece and then slashed to insert the eyelet lace. 2 petticoats came with this dress, though I don't know that they were worn with it. This one is a midi length, has a thicker waistband, and though the material is the exact same color as the ensemble, the fabric is a thicker, harder wearing fabric, except for the fabric on the flounce. The material there is the same fine cotton as the ensemble. The flounce is embroidered with flowers and vines and dots, and just a lovely scalloped edge. You can see here that the center of the flowers are worked eyelets, which is just like so dear. I love the scallops, I love the dots at the scallops, and I love how there's a second row of scalloped edging underneath. The flounce is attached with a felled seam, and you can see that it did close with a button. The front of the petticoat is flat. I was actually wondering if it was a side closure as opposed to a back closure, but then I noticed that the front is flat all the way across. But if we turn it over, we can see here at the back how there are gathers gathered into the waistband all across the back. Mainly centered, like focused at the center back. Now we've turned it inside out. You can see the placket. This placket is set into a slash as opposed to a seam. The front of the petticoat has 2 gores, the back has 3. And all of the seams are felled, though some of them are not very well done. The stitching, the top stitching was done kind of far from the edge, and so we do have these raw bits peeking out, and it kind of resembles like a poorly done French seam. It's just a strange little piece, and it kind of makes me feel better about my like precision machine sewing skills because they don't exist. And I just love the scalloped edges. I'm a hand sew girl, so I appreciate this kind of work, and machine sewing stresses me out. So this petticoat is a bonus. I totally forgot that it came with these other items, and I forgot about it in the bottom of the box. So here it is, this lovely little piece. It's made out of the same sturdy fabric. It has no buttonholes, so probably closed with a hook and eye closure. Has that wider waistband, and that sturdy substantial fabric. You can see that we have some errant threads here and there that were probably used for bar tacks for a hook. They are kind of here and there throughout the garment, and I thought maybe they could have been where the piece was taken in, but there aren't any folds that would indicate that had happened. So I'm leaning more toward hook and eye. There is a yoke that runs the entire width of the piece. That yoke is all one piece. There is no side seam. It runs all the way around to the back. The front is constructed of 3 gores. And the flounce here is felled into this, it's the seam that the flounce is attached to is felled, and there are accompanying seams to the panels. This is all one piece across the front, however, and then we have some slight gathers and alternating lace with pin tucks, and more lace, pin tucks, lace, set of pin tucks, and then a ruffle that ends with more lace. Underneath you can see that the lining area and how it also ends with a ruffle. So the back of the skirt is again gathered into the yoke, kind of like the other petticoat was done. Here we can see the back center seam that the placket is set into. So that is the placket up at the top there. And the seam is kind of felled, but not quite. This, you can see how this is felled, which is the lining for the flounce. And it finishes in 1/2-inch hem. And looking at this through the light, we can see that it's encasing about 1/2 inch of raw edge in there as well. So we can see that the seams are sort of felled. They're just, I think, poorly done, so that we have raw edges peeking out. And yeah, this makes me, I don't know, feel better about life. And yeah, we got some fuzz and some strings happening. And I will tell you though, I love this piece and I want to try it on. I'm not going to. And I think it's my measurements, but I'm not going to do it. There again, you can see how the machine stitching has gone a little off course. And it's just a lovely, sweet little petticoat.
So this dress is actually very ordinary. It's not really trimmed very heavily. It's plain as far as wedding dresses come. I actually love that about this piece. There's no lace, there's no silk, there's not even a train on the skirt. It's just a lovely ordinary woman's dress for just a lovely ordinary girl. That's from a Jimmy Stewart movie, right? Anyway, my great-grandparents were married in a little town in Pennsylvania in 1902. From what I understand, they were happy and a nice middle-class family. The dress supports the style of that time, and it's important to validate the provenance of a piece. Sometimes stories get handed down and the information gets warped. Like playing telephone, it's always a good idea to get supporting evidence from the garment itself. And I say that as one who has been burned. Now, I actually was going to scrap this whole video about it was almost done, almost edited, almost completely done, and I was ready to throw it into the digital trash because I knew that I had a photo from what I was told was Walter and Mary's wedding. Well, one of those things is wrong. The image that I have is from a wedding. There's actually the wedding couple seated, and there are a couple of friends behind them, and in the background you can see people having a meal. Anyway, I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and I finally found it. And let me tell you folks, this is not the same dress. It is a completely different dress than what I just showed you. I don't know who the dress belongs to, what occasion it was worn for, why it was saved, but when I found it, I didn't know what to do. But I realized that this is still a learning experience. It's still a piece to study, and there is some learning that I can do about my own personal family history, so that maybe I can actually figure out who this belonged to. Now, I hope that you stick with this channel. I hope to have a new video up every 2 weeks. And like I said at the beginning, some of them will be sewing adventures. Many will be like this one, looking at extant garments. But I've learned a lot from making this video. Some of what to do and some of what not to do. And I hope to keep improving. But if there are any areas of this dress that you didn't get to see enough, let me know down in the comments and I can try to, fix that. I want to help people in their sewing adventures as much as possible, and I know that examining extant garments has really helped me and mine. Now, as plain as this dress was, our next one is actually the polar opposite. So stay tuned. 2 weeks we have a very heavily trimmed, in very terrible shape. Again, 19 teens, but a much different style, or 19 teens, yeah, this one's 1902, not again. The next 2 videos looking at extant garments will be 19 teens, and then I have some sewing projects that are coming up that I hope will be interesting to anybody that stumbles upon this channel. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you come back. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them below. And thanks for watching.